I noticed my daughter-in-law wearing designer clothes and expensive jewelry. Something felt wrong, so I logged into my bank account and my blood ran cold. She'd been transferring thousands. I stayed quiet and called my lawyer. The next morning, she walked into the kitchen smiling until she tried to use her card and screamed, "Subscribe to the channel. Leave your like and comment. From which part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin." The light caught the gold links as she reached for the sugar bowl. It was not a flash of costume jewelry. It was the specific hard glitter of real diamonds set in white gold, a continuous line of them encircling my daughter-in-law's wrist. A tennis bracelet. I knew what they cost. Chloe's part-time receptionist salary did not cover such things. "More coffee, Mom Nora?" she asked, her voice sweet as honey. "No, thank you, dear." I kept my tone even. "That's a beautiful bracelet. Is it new? Is it—" She beamed, extending her arm across the kitchen table so the stones could catch the morning sun streaming through the window. "Isn't it just perfect? I found the most fantastic sale online. A once-in-a-lifetime steal." "A steal," I repeated, the words feeling heavy on my tongue. I smiled. The same warm smile I had given her for 5 years. My eyes noted the careful presentation, the way she tilted her wrist for maximum effect. I saw the new leather handbag hanging on the back of her chair, its logo subtle but recognizable. I had seen it in a magazine ad last month. There had been no sale price listed. My son Marcus kissed the top of my head as he grabbed his travel mug. "Gotta run. Big deployment today." He squeezed Chloe's shoulder. "You two have a good day." The door closed behind him, leaving a silence filled with the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the wall clock Robert had hung 40 years ago. Chloe chattered about a new boutique downtown. I nodded, sipping my coffee, watching her. After she left, claiming a lunch date, I remained at the table. The kitchen was clean and quiet. The house was quiet. It was a peaceful quiet, one Robert and I had built together, brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice. We had saved for this calm. We had foregone fancy cars and extravagant vacations so our son could go to college without debt, so I could retire from the library with security, so this house would be fully ours. A cold, solid feeling settled in my stomach. It was not panic. It was a dreadful clarity. I went to my home office, a small room lined with books. I sat at the old oak desk and opened my laptop. My financial life was orderly. I had a checking account for daily needs, a savings account for emergencies, and a few conservative investments Beverly helped me manage. The emergency savings account was a joint one with Marcus. We'd set it up years ago, after Robert passed, for household emergencies. A new water heater, a sudden roof repair. Marcus was an authorized user. He had added Chloe for convenience. I logged in. The balance should have been just over $28,000. The screen loaded. The available balance was $24,850. I clicked on the transaction history. My own small transfers for utilities were there. Then I saw it. 3 days ago, a transfer for $3,000 to a company called Luxadorn. The memo line was blank. I sat very still. The blue light from the screen reflected in my reading glasses. I could hear Robert's voice, patient and firm, as we balanced our checkbook every Sunday night. "Every dollar has a purpose, Ellie. We give it a job before it spends itself." I opened a new tab and searched for Luxadorn. It was an online retailer specializing in fine jewelry and designer accessories. The homepage featured a model wearing a diamond tennis bracelet. The cold in my stomach spread. I methodically began to scroll back through the transaction history month by month. I had not scrutinized this account closely in a while. It was for emergencies. I trusted my family. 4 months ago, a transfer for $500 to Stella Design. 3 months ago, $750 to the same. 2 months ago, $1,200 to Vault Couture. Last month, 2 transfers, one for $800, another for $1,500. The amounts had been escalating. The recipients were all high-end boutiques I had never patronized. The total, added to the $3,000, came to $7,750. Gone, dripping away while I baked cookies and asked about their day. I did not cry. I did not slam the laptop shut. A strange calm descended over me, the kind that comes when you finally name a pain you have been ignoring. This was not an emergency repair. This was a deliberate excavation of my safety, my history, my peace. I opened the desk drawer and took out a leather-bound ledger, one of many from Robert's meticulous record-keeping. I turned to a fresh page. At the top, I wrote the date. Then I began to copy, in my clear librarian script, each fraudulent transaction: date, amount, recipient. I noted the current depleted balance beside the expected balance. I returned to the computer. I took screenshots of every relevant transaction. I saved them in a folder on my desktop. I did not change any passwords. I did not alter any account settings. I simply observed and documented, as I had taught students to do with primary sources. Gather the evidence first. Understand the full story. I thought of Chloe's bright, laughing face at breakfast, the performative gratitude, the constant talk of sales and luck. She saw my comfortable home, my paid-off car, my simple but good clothes, and she did not see a lifetime of discipline. She saw idle wealth, a pot to be dipped into. The anger arrived then, not as a hot rush, but as a deep, glacial weight. It was layered over a profound sadness. This was my family. This was the woman my son loved. I had welcomed her. I had tried. I closed the ledger. The evidence was captured. The theft was confirmed. The why was evident in every flashy bauble she wore. The what next was a vast, empty space. I knew one thing. This would not continue. Robert and I had worked too hard. I had lived too carefully. This security was not just money. It was my independence, my dignity, the physical manifestation of our love and labor. It was not for her to fund her fantasies. I put the ledger in the desk drawer and locked it with a small key. The house was still quiet, but the silence had changed. It was no longer peaceful. It was expectant. It was the quiet before a necessary storm. My next steps required thought. They required precision, and they required a conversation with Beverly. The lock clicked shut on the desk drawer, a small final sound in the quiet room. The evidence was safe. The shock had crystallized into a cold, clear purpose. I would not confront Chloe yet. First, I needed the full picture. I needed to know exactly how deep the betrayal ran. I spent the remainder of that day in a state of focused normalcy. I watered my begonias. I prepared a chicken for roasting. When Marcus and Chloe came for dinner, I was the picture of grandmotherly warmth. I asked about Marcus's deployment, admired Chloe's new earrings, small gold hoops she claimed were vintage finds, and passed the peas without a tremble in my hand. I observed her. The casual way she discussed returning a sweater that just didn't fit right from an expensive brand. The offhand mention of a weekend spa trip with a friend. Each detail was a data point filed away. That night, after the dishes were done and the house was silent once more, I returned to my office. The blue light of the monitor was my only companion. I did not just revisit the joint savings account. I logged into everything: my personal checking, my money market account, the investment portal Beverly monitored. I examined every transaction line by line going back 12 months. The pattern was not just in the joint account. I found 3 transfers from my personal checking to Chloe's PayPal account. They were labeled family gift and for amounts like $250 and $300. I had authorized no such gifts. She must have had my login credentials. I recalled, with a sickening lurch, the weekend 6 months ago when my tablet had been acting strangely. Chloe had fixed it for me, sitting right here at this desk, her fingers flying over the screen. How long had she watched me enter my password? How carefully had she planned this? The total, when I finished adding columns in my ledger, was $12,440. Over $12,000, siphoned away in increments designed to avoid notice. The initial small sums, testing the waters, then the escalating amounts as her confidence, or her greed, grew. The recent $3,000 bracelet purchase was not an anomaly. It was the culmination of a year of quiet theft. I printed every statement. The soft whir of the printer was the only sound. I did not feel the crushing sadness I expected. Instead, I felt a sharp, clean anger. This was not an impulsive act. This was a campaign. She had assessed my accounts as a predator assesses terrain, and she had begun a systematic harvest. I thought of Robert, of the years he worked overtime at the engineering firm, coming home with lines of fatigue etched deep around his eyes, of our vacations, which were long drives to state parks, picnics I packed meticulously to save money, of the single glass of wine we would share on Friday nights, celebrating another week of prudent living. We were building something, a future, security. For us, for Marcus. Chloe had taken those sacrificed hours, those careful decisions, and converted them into sparkles for her wrist and handbags for her closet. She had reduced a lifetime of discipline to a line item in her personal luxury budget. As the first gray light of dawn touched the window, I closed the ledger. My back ached from hours in the chair. My eyes were dry and tired, but my mind was utterly alert. I had all the evidence I needed. The emotional work was over. Now it was a matter of strategy. I picked up my phone. It was too early to call, but I typed out a text to Beverly Carter. We had been friends since our sons were in kindergarten together. She had handled Robert's will. She was the only person outside of family I trusted completely. "Bev, I need to speak with you today. It's urgent, a financial matter." I sent it. Her reply came less than a minute later. "My office, 10 a.m. coffee will be ready." The 3 hours between my text and the meeting passed with a strange, suspended quality. I showered and dressed with extra care, choosing a simple navy dress and my pearl earrings. Armor, of a sort. I made tea but did not drink it. I sat at the kitchen table watching the clock, running through what I would say. At 9:30, I gathered the folder of printed statements and my handwritten ledger. I placed them in my sturdy leather satchel, the one I used to carry library books. I locked the house and drove across town to Beverly's office, the folder resting on the passenger seat like a silent passenger. Her office was in a dignified brick building. Her receptionist, a woman my age, nodded me back immediately. Beverly's door was open. She stood as I entered, her sharp eyes missing nothing. She took in my posture, the satchel, the careful control on my face. "Nora," she said, coming around the desk to embrace me briefly. She held me at arm's length. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Not a ghost," I said, my voice steady. "A thief." I placed the satchel on her polished mahogany desk. I opened it and laid out the ledger first, then the printed statements with the most damning transactions highlighted in yellow. I did not speak while she looked. I simply stood there, my hands clasped in front of me, watching her face. Her expression shifted from concern to focused attention, then to a flat, grim understanding. She flipped pages, her lips pressed into a thin line. She muttered numbers under her breath, adding mentally. Finally, she looked up. "Chloe," she stated. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "Over $12,000. "Yes." Beverly leaned back in her chair, steepling her fingers. The warmth she'd greeted me with was gone, replaced by the professional rigor that made her an excellent attorney. "Tell me everything. From the beginning." I sat in the client chair and told her. The bracelet, the bank login, the discovered transfers, the pattern, my realization about the tablet. I spoke without embellishment, just facts and dates and amounts. My voice did not shake. When I finished, Beverly was silent for a full minute. She looked from the papers to me and back again. "Okay," she said finally, "this is embezzlement, fraud. We have more than enough for a police report." The word police hung in the air. I imagined uniforms, handcuffs, my son's devastated face, the public shattering of our family. I don't want the police, I said. Not yet. I want my money back, every cent, and I want her to know she was caught. I want her to feel the walls close in. A slow, hard smile touched Beverly's lips. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a strategist recognizing a worthy objective. Then we don't go to the police first, we go to her, but we do it with the full force of the law behind us, so she has no room to maneuver. She tapped the papers. We need to secure your accounts, change every password, set up new accounts, but we don't do it all at once. What do you mean? If we lock everything down today, she'll know she's caught. She'll spin a story to Marcus. She might even try to destroy evidence. We need her to commit one more act, a definitive one. We let her think the well is still full. We let her reach for one more bucket, and then we slam the cover shut while her hand is still inside. I understood immediately. It was a trap, a legal financial trap. We need to leave the joint account active, but we move the real money out. Exactly, Beverly said. We move the bulk to a new account only you control. We leave, say, $5,000 in the old one, enough to look normal. We monitor it. When she makes another attempt, and she will, Nora, people like this always do, we have our final, irrefutable proof. Then we pounce. I looked at the evidence on the desk, at my friend's determined face. The path forward was no longer a vast, empty space. It was a narrow, deliberate road, and I was ready to walk it. What do I need to do first? First, Beverly said, opening a fresh legal pad, we draft a letter to the bank authorizing the new account structure. Then you go home and act perfectly normal. You be the sweet, trusting mother-in-law. You give her enough rope, Nora, and we will watch her hang herself with it. Beverly's words, "Give her enough rope," echoed in my mind as I drove home. The plan was no longer an abstract idea. It was a series of concrete steps. The first step was the most dangerous, acting normally. I had to become a performer in my own home. I parked in the garage and sat for a moment, my hands resting on the steering wheel. I breathed in, then out, letting the righteous anger settle into something usable, something steady. I could not afford a single misstep. When I walked into the kitchen, I wore the face of Eleanor Johnson, the kind, slightly absent-minded mother-in-law. Chloe was there, scrolling through her phone at the table. A shopping website was open on the screen. "Hello, dear," I said, placing my satchel on a chair. "Busy day?" She looked up, a practiced smile already in place. "Just browsing. You know how it is. Did you have a nice morning?" "Lovely," I said, filling the kettle at the sink. "I met Beverly for coffee. We finally got around to discussing some updates to Robert's estate paperwork. Boring old lady business." I kept my tone light, dismissive. It was a seed, a mention of finances, but framed as tedious and administrative. "Oh," Chloe said, her interest visibly perking up before she smoothed it over. "That sounds important." "It's just paperwork," I said with a wave of my hand, "but it does make me feel secure, having everything in order. Robert always said, peace of mind is the best investment." I turned to face her, leaning against the counter. "Don't you think, knowing exactly where you stand?" Her eyes met mine, and for a fraction of a second, I saw a flicker of something, unease or perhaps calculation. Then it was gone, replaced by earnest agreement. "Absolutely. Security is everything." The performance had begun. That afternoon, from the privacy of my home office with the door locked, I executed the financial maneuvers Beverly and I had outlined. I called my bank. With the authorization letters Beverly had prepared already on their way, I opened a new high-yield savings account in my name only. Then I initiated a transfer. I moved $23,000 from the compromised joint savings account to the new secure one. I left exactly $5,000 behind. The bait. I changed every password for every financial institution I used. I logged out of all devices. I set up new, complex passwords and stored them in a physical notebook I kept in my safe deposit box. I did not feel like a victim reclaiming power. I felt like a technician rerouting circuits, isolating a faulty line before it could cause a fire. The next day, I visited the bank in person to sign the final documents. The personal banker, a young man named David, was courteous and efficient. "Setting up a new nest egg, Mrs. Johnson?" he asked pleasantly. "Something like that," I said, signing my name with a firm, clear stroke. "Just consolidating for peace of mind." "Very wise," he said. From there, I went to the office supply store. I purchased a heavy cream-colored folder and a pack of divider tabs. At home, I began to assemble the dossier. This was not the hidden ledger of discovery. This was the presentation for the confrontation. Section 1. Bank statements with the fraudulent transfers highlighted. Section 2. Printed screenshots of the luxury retailer websites matching the transaction amounts. Section 3. A summarized timeline in chronological order. Section 4. A copy of the initial police report Beverly advised we have on standby, filled out but not yet filed. The final section was left empty, waiting for the last piece of evidence, the transaction that would spring the trap. It was a Wednesday evening when the first test came. Marcus and Chloe came over for dinner. Chloe was particularly animated, talking about a friend's destination wedding in Cabo the following year. "It's going to be so incredible," she gushed. "Everyone's going. The flights are crazy expensive already, but I found a package deal. Marcus, we really should book soon." Marcus nodded, focused on his meatloaf. "We'll look at the budget, hun." "The budget can stretch," she said, a slight edge to her voice. Then she turned to me, her expression softening into one of conspiratorial sympathy. "It's so hard to save for these things, isn't it, Mom Nora? Life just gets so expensive." I took a sip of water, meeting her gaze. "It can be, but Robert taught me that if you can't afford something outright, you probably don't need it. Delayed gratification builds character." I paused, then added, "And it protects you from desperation." Marcus chuckled. "Mom's old school." Chloe's smile was tight. "Very wise," she said, echoing the banker's words, but without his sincerity. I saw her glance at my hands, at my simple wedding band, and the watch Robert had given me for our 30th anniversary. It was a good watch, but not flashy. I knew she saw the absence of the diamonds she coveted. She saw frugality, not security. She saw an old woman's simplicity, not a fortress of self-control. Later, as they were leaving, Chloe hugged me. "Thanks for dinner, Mom Nora. You're always so steady." I patted her back. "It's my job, dear, to be a rock for my family." When the door closed, I leaned against it. The word steady rang in my ears. She meant predictable. She meant reliable. She meant an easy mark. I went to my desk and opened my laptop. I navigated to the joint account. The balance sat at $5,000. No new activity. Yet. I opened my email and wrote to Beverly. The subject line was, "The hook is baited." Her reply came quickly. "Now we wait and watch. Don't touch anything. Let her make the move. Record everything." I closed the laptop. The house was deeply quiet. The trap was set. The mechanisms were in place. All that was required now was for the thief to walk into it. My role was to wait, to observe, and to continue the performance. The anger was still there, a cold stone in my chest, but it was overlaid with a patient certainty. This was no longer just about the money. It was about proving that the quiet, steady rock she took for granted was, in fact, the hardest surface of all. The waiting was an active discipline. I did not simply pause my life. I curated it with deliberate normalcy. I rose at my usual time. I tended my garden, the repetitive motion of weeding and watering a form of meditation. I baked Marcus's favorite lemon pound cake and left it on his porch with a note. I visited the library where I used to work and checked out 3 historical novels. I lived the portrait of a contented, unremarkable retiree. Every interaction with Chloe was a studied performance. I dialed up my warmth by a careful degree. I asked after her friends by name. I complimented her outfits with specific, non-threatening observations. "That color blue is lovely on you," I would say, or "Your hair looks so healthy." I became the quintessential supportive mother-in-law, the one she could confide in. She began to confide more, or at least her version of confiding. It was always framed as frustration or shared commiseration. "My car is making this awful noise," she sighed one afternoon, visiting under the pretense of returning a borrowed pie dish. "The repair estimate is astronomical. It's just so unfair when you're trying to be responsible." I nodded sympathetically from my armchair. "I know the feeling. Robert and I had a transmission go on our old Buick the year Marcus started college. We ate beans and rice for a month to pay for it." I leaned forward, lowering my voice conspiratorially. "But you know, we had a separate little fund for car repairs, just a few dollars from each paycheck. It wasn't much, but when trouble came, it was there. Do you and Marcus have anything like that?" Her eyes flickered. I had just told her, in a roundabout way, that I believed in separate, specific funds, that I was the type to have a stash. She was probing my defenses, and I was showing her a fake, undefended wall. "We try," she said, her voice taking on a wistful tone. "But with everything so expensive, it's hard to build it up. Not everyone has your discipline, Mom Nora." "Oh, it's not discipline, dear," I said with a light laugh. "It's just habit. A boring old habit." I waved a hand as if to dismiss the virtue of it. "Sometimes I think I should be more spontaneous like you young people." The flattery, the diminishment of my own prudence. It worked. I could see her relax. She saw my behavior not as a strategy, but as ingrained, predictable pattern. The rock was just being a rock. Several days later, she and Marcus came for Sunday dinner. Chloe was particularly effusive. She brought a bouquet of overpriced peonies from a downtown florist. "A little beauty for the queen of the house," she said, presenting them. "They're extravagant," I said, accepting them. "You shouldn't have." The double meaning in my words was for my own ears only. During dinner, she talked excitedly about a 4-day luxury wellness retreat in Sedona. It's all inclusive: yoga, meditation, gourmet meals, mineral pools. My friend Alicia just went and said it was life-changing. She posted the most amazing photos. Marcus chewed his roast chicken. "Sounds pricey, Chloe." "It's an investment in mental health," she countered, her tone breezy. "And they have a payment plan option. You pay a deposit to lock in the rate and the rest later." She looked at me. "Don't you think wellness is important, Mom Nora?" "Vital," I agreed, passing her the green beans. "But I find my wellness right here in this garden. It costs me the price of a packet of seeds and some time." I smiled. "But then I'm a simple creature." She laughed, a tinkling sound. "You're adorable." After they left, I cleared the table methodically. The retreat was the next logical step. A deposit, a larger sum than a bracelet, but not the full amount. It was a test of a different kind. She was moving from accessories to experiences. The bait in the account was $5,000. A deposit for a luxury retreat would likely be between $1,000 and $2,000. It would leave plenty behind, maintaining the illusion of a healthy balance. I did not check the account that night. Checking too often might trigger some security alert she could see, or worse, it would feed my own anxiety. Beverly's instructions were clear. Let the machinery work. The bank alerts were set. My job was to live my life. The next morning, I went to the farmer's market. I spoke with the vendors about tomatoes and corn. I bought a jar of local honey. The summer sun was warm on my shoulders. I felt a strange detachment, as if I were watching myself go through these pleasant, ordinary motions from a great height. The real action was happening in the silent digital space of bank servers. It was late afternoon when my phone, sitting on the kitchen counter, emitted a soft but distinct chime. It was not my usual text tone. It was the specific sound I had assigned to transaction alerts from the joint account. I finished wiping down the counter. I folded the dishcloth and hung it neatly over the faucet. I picked up the phone. The notification was on the lock screen. It was from my bank. Alert. A CH debit pending. Amount $2,275. Merchant Serenity Springs Retreats, LLC. Below, it was a second alert. Alert. Current available balance, $2,725. She had taken the bait. She had reached into the well for a bucket, and the mechanism had engaged. The pending transaction was the sound of the trap closing. It was not yet finalized. It would take a business day or two to clear. That was our window. I did not feel triumph. I felt a cold, surgical satisfaction. The evidence was now complete. She had committed a new, actionable theft with the full knowledge the account was nearly drained. There was no excuse of accident or misunderstanding possible. I opened my email and typed a single sentence to Beverly. The deposit has been initiated. Serenity Springs Retreats, $2,275. Her reply was almost instantaneous. Perfect. Do not touch a thing. The reversal instructions are already with the bank. Let it post, then we move. I put the phone down. I looked out the window at my garden, at the neat rows and the blooming flowers. Everything was in its place. The waiting was over. Now it was time to prepare for the harvest. The pending transaction hung in the digital ether for 2 business days. I did not check the account. I followed the routine. I deadheaded the roses. I organized my linen closet. I read one of the historical novels. I performed the waiting with a stillness that felt ancient. On the morning of the 3rd day, the second alert came. The same chime. I was stirring oatmeal on the stove when it sounded. I turned off the burner, moved the pot to a cool coil, and then picked up the phone. Alert. A CH debit completed. Amount $2,275. Merchant Serenity Springs Retreats, LLC. Alert. Current available balance, $2,725. It was done. The money had left the account. Chloe believed she had secured her luxury escape. She would be imagining desert sunsets and spa treatments. Her financial theft successfully converted into a curated experience. I opened my banking app, not to stop anything, but to witness. The completed transaction was listed. I took a screenshot. Then I opened my email. The draft I had prepared to Beverly with the screenshot attached needed only a single click. I sent it. Her reply came within the hour, not as an email, but as a phone call. "It's posted," she said, her voice crisp. "The bank has executed the reversal per our instructions. The funds are being pulled back from the merchant. The account is now frozen for investigation of fraudulent activity. She'll likely get a notification from Serenity Springs first, then from the bank." "What are the next steps?" I asked, my voice calm. "The legal letters are ready. I'll have my courier bring them to you this afternoon. You should review them. Then we wait for her to discover the reversal. That's when you present her with the first letter, the civil demand for restitution. The second letter, outlining the potential criminal charges, is for if she refuses or creates a scene." "Understood." "Oh, Nora," Beverly said, her tone shifting slightly. "You're sure you're ready for this? Once you hand her that paper, there's no going back to how things were." I looked out the kitchen window at the bright day. "There hasn't been a how things were for a long time, Beverly. Not really. I'm ready." The courier arrived at 1 o'clock. The envelope was thick and heavy. I took it to my desk. Inside were 2 sets of documents, each in its own crisp folder. The first was a formal letter on Beverly's law firm, Letterhead. It was addressed to Chloe Johnson. It stated in clear and unemotional language that I, Eleanor Johnson, was aware of the unauthorized withdrawals from my financial accounts totaling $14,715 over the past 12 months. It listed the dates and amounts, referencing the attached summary. It demanded full restitution of that amount within 72 hours, via cashier's check or direct bank transfer to a specified account. It stated that upon receipt of full repayment, no further civil action would be pursued. It was signed by Beverly Carter, Eskiers. The second letter was shorter, more severe. It outlined the evidence of embezzlement and fraud. It stated that a detailed report and all financial evidence were prepared for submission to the district attorney's office. It explained that criminal prosecution could result in restitution, fines, and potential imprisonment. This letter was not a demand. It was a statement of fact, held in reserve. Attached to each were copies of the transaction summary and the highlighted bank statements. The evidence was presented not as a messy pile of printouts, but as a cold, professional indictment. I read every word twice. They were perfect. They removed emotion and replaced it with consequence. They translated my betrayal into a balance due, my heartache into a legal precedent. I placed the civil demand letter and its attachments back into its folder. I placed the criminal outline letter in my desk drawer, locking it away. The first folder I left on my desk, next to the heavy cream-colored dossier I had assembled earlier. They looked like siblings, one my personal record of the crime, the other the legal instrument of its resolution. The afternoon sun slanted across the desk. I sat there for a long time. I thought about the confrontation to come. I rehearsed no speeches. I would need very few words. The papers would speak for me. My eyes drifted to the framed photograph on the corner of my desk. It was Robert and me on our 25th anniversary. We were on a picnic blanket, laughing. Behind us was the lake we couldn't afford to vacation at, so we'd driven there for the day. Our happiness was not purchased. It was built. I picked up the frame. I traced the line of his smile with my finger. The cold, surgical satisfaction I had felt earlier softened, warmed by the memory. This was for him, too, for the overtime hours, the packed lunches, the shared dreams, saved for in a jar on the dresser. He had built a fortress of security for us with his 2 hands. I would not let it be looted. A profound certainty settled over me. This was the correct path. It was just. It was measured. It was the only way to reclaim what was ours without becoming a monster in the process. I was not setting out to destroy Chloe. I was setting a boundary made of steel and law. She would run into it at full speed. I replaced the photograph. I aligned it neatly with the corner of the desk. I looked at the 2 folders lying side by side. Then I gave a single firm nod. The preparation was complete. The machinery of justice was in motion. All that remained was for the thief to realize the ground had shifted beneath her feet. I would be waiting, seated calmly at my kitchen table, when she did. The morning the trap was set to spring, dawned clear and bright. I awoke before sunrise, not from anxiety, but from a sense of solemn readiness. Today, the performance would reach its final act. I moved through the quiet house with a deliberate pace. I showered and dressed in a simple linen shift, comfortable and dignified. I went to the kitchen. I measured the coffee grounds, filled the carafe with cold water, and pressed the brew button. The familiar gurgle and drip were a comforting ritual. I took bacon from the refrigerator and laid the strips in a cold skillet, then turned the heat to medium-low. I preferred it cooked slowly, evenly. I cracked eggs into a bowl and whisked them with a fork. I set the table for 3, though I did not expect Marcus to join us. It was part of the set dressing. The sun rose, casting long, warm beams across the tile floor. The smell of coffee and frying bacon filled the room. It was a perfect, ordinary morning. I felt a profound calm. The machinery was in motion. My role now was to be the still, unshakable center. At 8:30, I heard Chloe's car pull into the driveway. Her footsteps were quick, light on the porch. She let herself in with the key I had given her years ago. "Good morning, Mom Nora," she called, her voice chirpy with excitement. She breezed into the kitchen, a cloud of expensive perfume preceding her. She was dressed for a day out, a stylish jumpsuit, large sunglasses perched on her head. The diamond tennis bracelet was on her wrist. "Something smells amazing." "Just a little breakfast," I said, turning the bacon with a fork. "I thought you might like something solid before your errands. Coffee's ready." "You're an angel," she said, pouring herself a mug. She leaned against the counter, sipping, her energy vibrating through the room. "I have the best day planned. Meeting Alicia for coffee at that new artisan place downtown, then some shopping. Maybe a manicure. I need to look my best. I have that retreat to daydream about now." She gave a little laugh. I plated the bacon and poured the eggs into the skillet. They sizzled softly. "It sounds like a lovely day. It's important to treat yourself." I kept my tone warm, benign. "That's exactly what I say," she agreed, scrolling through her phone with her free hand. "Life's too short. You have to seize opportunities." She glanced at the clock on the microwave. "I should probably eat and run. Alicia is always so punctual." "Sit," I said, bringing 2 plates to the table. "The eggs are just right." We sat across from each other. The sunlight fell between us on the checked tablecloth. I passed her the toast. She ate quickly, her mind clearly elsewhere, her phone face up on the table beside her plate. I ate slowly, savoring the food, observing her. "You seem very happy this morning," I remarked. "I am," she said, her smile wide and genuine. "I just feel like everything is falling into place, you know? It's a good feeling." "Yes," I said. "It is." I knew her feeling was based on the belief that $2,000 of my money was now securing her luxury getaway. My feeling was based on knowing it had been clawed back and her access was being severed at that very moment. We were both content, for diametrically opposed reasons. She finished her eggs and stood, taking her plate to the sink. I should dash. "Thank you so much for breakfast, Mom Nora. You're the best." She gave me a quick, perfumed hug. "Have a wonderful time, dear," I said, remaining seated. "Enjoy your coffee with Alicia." She grabbed her designer handbag and was out the door with a flutter of her hand. I listened as her car started and pulled away. The house settled back into silence, but it was a different silence than before. It was the silence after the arrow has been loosed from the bow, traveling unseen toward its target. I finished my coffee. I cleared the table. I washed the dishes by hand, the warm, soapy water a tangible, grounding sensation. I knew the sequence of events Beverly had arranged. The reversal would have been processed first thing this morning. Serenity Springs Retreats would have been notified the payment had been recalled due to suspected fraud. They, in turn, would likely email Chloe to inform her her deposit was invalid and her booking canceled. That would be her first clue. Then she would check her banking app. She would see the reverse transaction. She would see the frozen account status. She would try to use her debit card. I dried the last plate and put it away. I wiped down the counters. I checked the time. It was 9:15. She would be meeting Alicia right about now. The Artisan Coffee Shop was a place where being seen was part of the experience. It was a perfect stage for a humiliation. I did not feel pity. I felt a sharp, clean sense of justice. She had chosen the venue for her own life, one of appearances and surfaces. It was fitting that the unraveling should begin there, in public, surrounded by the aesthetic she valued so highly. My phone rang. It was Beverly. "It's done," she said. "The bank confirms the reversal and account freeze are complete. The merchant has been notified. The letters are in your possession?" "They are," I said. "Then your part is almost over. Just the presentation. Call me if you need me." "I will." I hung up. I walked to the living room and sat in my favorite armchair, the one that looked out onto the front yard. I picked up my current library book but did not open it. I simply sat, hands folded in my lap, and waited. I was not waiting with anxiety. I was waiting like a surgeon waits for a procedure to begin, all instruments prepared, mind focused on the task ahead. The calm in the house was absolute. It was the calm of a settled matter. The calm in my living room was a tangible thing. I sat with my book unopened, listening to the ordinary sounds of the neighborhood. A lawnmower in the distance, a dog barking, the mail truck's familiar stop and start progression. My mind was not on the waiting. It was on the precise series of events that were, at this moment, unfolding downtown. I had no need to imagine the scene in vivid detail. The consequences were a mathematical certainty. My phone, silent on the side table, buzzed once. A text notification. I did not reach for it immediately. I finished a paragraph in my book, marked my place with a cloth bookmark, and then picked up the device. The text was from Marcus. "Mom, have you heard from Chloe?" She just called me, absolutely hysterical. Something about her cards not working at the cafe. She wasn't making much sense. I'm tied up in a meeting. Can you try her? I typed a reply, my fingers steady. I haven't heard from her, but I'm home. Send her my way if she needs somewhere to go. I'll make some tea. The message was a perfect blend of concern and innocent availability. I put the phone down. The hysterical call to Marcus was phase 1. The text to me was an interlude. Phase 2 would be her arrival here, which I estimated would occur within the next 20 to 30 minutes, depending on traffic and the depth of her panic. I went to the kitchen. I filled the kettle and set it on the stove. I took down 2 teacups, the good china with the delicate rose pattern. I placed them on the kitchen table. I did not retrieve the folders from my office. Not yet. First, she would need to voice her confusion. She would need to present her version of events, which would be a story of banking errors and unfair treatment. I would listen. Then I would present the truth. The kettle began its low whistle when I heard the car. It was not her usual controlled purr up the driveway. It was a sharp, angry sound of tires on asphalt, then a harsh stop. The car door slammed with unnecessary force. Seconds later, the front door burst open. Chloe stood in the foyer, her face blotchy and tear-streaked, her hair escaping its stylish knot. Her designer bag was clutched to her chest like a shield. The aura of cheerful entitlement was gone, replaced by a raw, indignant panic. "Mom, Nora," she gasped, stumbling into the kitchen. "Something is terribly wrong. The bank has made a catastrophic error." I turned off the whistle of the kettle. "Goodness, dear, sit down. You look upset." I poured the hot water into the teapot to let it steep. My movements were slow, deliberate. "Upset?" Her voice was a shrill scrape. "I'm humiliated. I was at the cafe with Alicia. I went to pay for our coffees and pastries. My card was declined. Declined! I tried another one. Declined. I even tried the joint account card Marcus and I have. Declined." The barista looked at me like I was some kind of deadbeat. People were staring. Alicia was so embarrassed for me. I had to let her pay. The last sentence was a wail of outrage, as if the indignity of a friend covering a $15 tab was the greatest crime. I brought the teapot to the table and sat across from her. "That does sound distressing. Were the cards expired?" "No, they're fine. I checked my banking app right there at the table." She fumbled with her phone, her hands shaking, and thrust the screen toward me. It showed the login page for the joint savings account. "It says the account is frozen." "Frozen! And look!" She swiped, showing a transaction list. The $2,275 debit to Serenity Springs was there, and directly below it, a credit for the same amount with the memo: "Reversal, fraudulent transaction." The available balance was listed as $0. "See?" she cried. "They've reversed my deposit. They've taken my money and frozen everything." I called the bank's fraud line. They said the primary account holder had reported unauthorized activity and initiated a freeze and reversals. They said I had to speak to the primary account holder. Her eyes were wide with a confusion that was starting to curdle into a dawning, terrifying suspicion. But Marcus wouldn't do this. He wouldn't even know how. Her voice trailed off. She looked from her phone screen to my face. I held her gaze, my expression one of calm attention. I did not blink. I did not offer a reassuring smile. I simply waited, letting the silence stretch, letting the logical conclusion travel from the bank's statement to her mind. The color drained from her face, leaving her makeup stark and uneven. The angry, victimized energy seeped out of her, replaced by something colder. "You," she whispered. The word was flat. "You're the primary account holder on that savings account." I inclined my head slightly, a confirmation. You reported it? As fraud?" Her voice was low now, trembling. "I did," I said. I reached for the teapot and poured tea into both cups. The liquid was a clear amber brown. "I reported a year's worth of fraudulent transactions, Chloe, starting with $500 to Stella Design and ending with $2,000. $275 to Serenity Springs Retreats just this week. I pushed one of the cups toward her. The bank was very efficient once provided with the evidence. She did not touch the cup. She stared at me as if seeing a stranger. The performative charm, the girlish exasperation, all of it was stripped away. What remained was a core of shock, and beneath that, a flicker of fear. "Evidence?" she repeated hoarsely. "I have all of it," I said. My tone was conversational, as if discussing grocery lists. Bank statements, screenshots, a detailed timeline. It's quite comprehensive. I took a sip of my tea. It was perfectly steeped. The bank has done its part. Now it's time for us to talk about the next steps. She was utterly still, her earlier hysteria frozen into a statue of dread. The trap was no longer abstract. It was here, in my sunny kitchen, smelling of Earl Grey and justice. She was inside it, and she knew it. She stared at me, the fear in her eyes hardening into a defensive glare. The shock was wearing off, and the instinct to fight was taking over. "Talk about next steps?" Her voice regained some of its sharpness. "This is a misunderstanding, Mom Nora. A huge, horrible mistake. Those transfers... Marcus must have done them for household things and forgot to note them. Or it's some bank glitch. You can't seriously believe I would steal from you." I did not reply to her denials. They were expected, the first line of defense. Instead, I stood from the table. "A misunderstanding," I repeated, my tone neutral. "Let's look at the details together, shall we? Then we can determine what kind of mistake it was." I walked to my home office. I did not hurry. I opened the door, crossed to my desk, and picked up the two folders, the thick, cream-colored dossier of my own compilation and the thinner legal folder from Beverly. I carried them back to the kitchen. Chloe watched me, her body rigid in the chair, her eyes locked onto the folders as if they were toxic. I resumed my seat. I placed the heavy, cream-colored folder on the table between us, but did not open it. "This," I said, resting my hand on it, "is a record of every unauthorized transaction from the last 12 months, $14,715. It includes bank statements, screenshots from the retailers, and a timeline." I paused, letting the total hang in the air. "I compiled it myself. It is very thorough." Her throat worked as she swallowed. "I don't need to see that. It's just numbers taken out of context." "Context is important," I agreed, "which is why I also have this." I slid the legal folder from Beverly across the smooth tabletop. It stopped directly in front of her. "This is not from me. This is from my attorney, Beverly Carter. Open it." She looked at the folder as if it might bite her. Slowly, with visibly trembling fingers, she reached out and opened the cover. Her eyes scanned the top page, the law firm letterhead, the formal salutation. She began to read silently, her face growing paler with each line. I watched her pupils dart back and forth, taking in the phrases, "unauthorized withdrawals," "evidence of embezzlement," "demand for full restitution," "72 hours." Her breath hitched. This is a legal letter," she whispered. "It is," I said, "a civil demand for restitution. It outlines the debt and the terms for repayment. If the debt is satisfied within the time frame specified, no further civil action will be taken." She looked up, a frantic hope flashing in her eyes. "So if I pay it back, that's it? We can forget this?" "The civil matter would be concluded," I said carefully. "The letter states that." "Okay," she said, her voice gaining speed. "Okay, I can work something out. I'll get the money. It might take a little time, but—" "There is another document behind that one," I interrupted, my voice still calm. "A summary of the criminal statutes relevant to this situation. It details the penalties for theft and fraud. That document is not a demand. It is an explanation. It exists so you understand the full scope of potential consequences if the civil demand is not met. My attorney has prepared a full packet for the district attorney. It is ready to be submitted." All the color that had drained from her face seemed to vanish completely, leaving a waxy, ghastly pallor. The frantic hope died. The folder in her hands was no longer just a bill. It was a blueprint of her ruin. "You would send me to jail?" The question was a thin scrape of sound. "I would report a crime that was committed against me," I corrected. "The legal system would determine the outcome. The choice of which path we take is, at this moment, yours. Repayment closes the civil matter. Non-repayment opens the criminal one." She slumped back in her chair, the defiant energy utterly gone. She was hollowed out by the sheer, unadorned finality of the papers before her. There was no room for manipulation, for tears, for spun stories. There were only facts, figures, and the law. "How long have you known?" she asked, not looking at me. "Since I saw the $3,000 transfer for your bracelet," I said. "I knew that morning." Her head jerked up. "And you said nothing. You just watched me." "I gathered evidence," I said. "I secured my assets. I consulted an attorney. And I waited for you to attempt one more transaction, which you did. The retreat deposit was the final, definitive piece. It proved the pattern was ongoing and deliberate." A terrible understanding dawned on her face. "The account? You left money in it on purpose. You knew I'd try to use it." "I anticipated that you would," I said. It was a reasonable prediction. She let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "You set a trap. This whole time, with your sweet smiles and your lemon pound cakes, you were setting a trap." I did not confirm or deny. I let the statement stand. I took another sip of my tea, which was now lukewarm. The silence in the kitchen was profound. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator. Finally she spoke, her voice flat and defeated. "What do you want me to do?" "The letter is clear," I said. "Full restitution, 72 hours. You will deliver a cashier's check or execute a direct transfer to the account specified. You will also remove yourself as an authorized user from any account of mine, and you will return any house keys in your possession. Once the money is returned and my property is secure, you and I will have no further financial interaction." "And Marcus?" she asked, a flicker of her old cunning returning. "What will you tell him?" "The truth," I said. "He will see the same evidence you have seen. He will draw his own conclusions. That is between you and him. My business is with the money." She stared at the open folder, at the damning words on the page. The reality of her situation was now inescapable, printed on heavyweight paper with a lawyer's letterhead. She had no moves left. The game was over, and she had lost. I watched her, this young woman I had once welcomed into my family. I felt no triumph, only a grim finality. "We need to talk about my money, Chloe," I said, echoing the words I had rehearsed only in my mind. But it seems the papers have done most of the talking for us. Chloe was still staring at the legal letter, her fingers leaving damp prints on the crisp paper, when we heard the front door open. Heavy, hurried footsteps crossed the foyer. Marcus called out, his voice tight with worry. "Mom, Chloe's car is here. Is everything okay?" He appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in his work clothes, his brow furrowed. His eyes went from Chloe's shattered expression to the folders on the table, then to my composed face. "What's going on, Chloe? You said there was a bank error." Before I could speak, Chloe surged to her feet, the chair scraping loudly on the floor. She was a dam breaking, words pouring out in a desperate flood. "Marcus, thank God you're here. It's a nightmare. Your mother has accused me of stealing. She set up some horrible misunderstanding with the bank, frozen our accounts, and now she's threatening me with lawyers." Tears, real or strategic, spilled down her cheeks. She moved toward him, hands outstretched. "You have to talk to her. Make her see this is all a mistake." Marcus instinctively put an arm around her, his confusion deepening. He looked at me, a plea in his eyes. "Mom? What is she talking about? Threatening?" I remained seated. I gestured to the empty chair at the table. "Sit down, Marcus. There's something you need to see." "Don't listen to her," Chloe cried, clutching his shirt. "She's confused. She's taken things out of context." "Marcus," I said, my voice low but clear, cutting through her panic. "Please, sit." He hesitated, then gently disengaged from Chloe's grip. He pulled out the chair and sat, his eyes never leaving mine. Chloe stood behind him, her hands on his shoulders, a possessive, stabilizing gesture. I opened the cream-colored dossier. I turned it to face him. I began with the timeline, the neat, handwritten columns. "This is a summary," I said. "Over the past 12 months, $14,715 has been transferred from my accounts without my knowledge or consent. The transactions began small and grew larger. They correspond to purchases from high-end retailers." I pointed to the first highlighted line. "This $500 transfer to Stella Design occurred on the 9th of last September. The following week, you and Chloe gave me a silk scarf from that same brand for my birthday." Marcus's eyes dropped to the page. He read the line. He said nothing. I turned to the bank statements. I showed him the highlighted transactions, one after another with the merchant names: Luxe Adorn, Vault Couture. Finally, I showed him the most recent, the completed debit to Serenity Springs Retreats and the immediate reversal for fraud. "This one happened this week," I said, after I had already discovered the pattern and secured most of the funds. It was the final, definitive act. Chloe's voice was a harsh whisper behind him. "I told you it's a misunderstanding. Those were for household things, gifts. She's twisting it." Marcus held up a hand, a request for silence. He was staring at the papers, his engineer's mind processing the data. He looked at the dates, the amounts. The pattern was unmistakable. "How?" he began, then stopped. He looked up at me. "How did she access the accounts?" "My login credentials," I said. "I believe she obtained them when she fixed my tablet 6 months ago. The joint savings account was already accessible to her as an authorized user." He absorbed this. I saw the pieces connecting in his mind: Chloe's sudden expertise with his mother's tech, her frequent new possessions, her constant talk of sales and luck, the vacation packages and spa days that stretched their shared budget. He had accepted her explanations, wanting peace, wanting to believe in his wife's happiness. "Show him the lawyer's letter," Chloe spat, her fear morphing back into anger. "Go on, show him how you're trying to destroy me." I slid the legal folder toward him. He opened it. He read the demand letter slowly. His face, usually so open and kind, became a mask of increasing strain. When he finished the first page, he flipped to the second, the summary of criminal statutes. His jaw tightened. He closed the folder. He did not look at Chloe. He looked at me, and his eyes were filled with a pain so profound it made my own chest ache. "You did all this? The investigation, the lawyer, without telling me?" "I needed evidence," I said. "Confrontation without proof is just an argument. I wanted the truth to be undeniable, for both of you." Finally, he turned in his chair to look up at Chloe. His movement was slow, weighted. "Is it true?" he asked. The question was simple, bare. "Marcus, no. How can you even ask? She's an old woman. She's confused. She's paranoid about her money." "Chloe," he interrupted, his voice frighteningly quiet. "Is it true? Did you take money from my mother's accounts to buy jewelry and clothes and a spa retreat?" The directness of the question stripped away her last refuge. She could see in his face that my evidence had landed. Her tears stopped. Her expression shifted, the victim's mask slipping to reveal a core of defiant justification. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under, to keep up appearances. Your salary isn't enough for the life we're supposed to have. She has all this money just sitting there, doing nothing. She doesn't need it. It was just sitting there." The kitchen was silent. Her words hung in the air, a perfect confession. Marcus stared at her as if seeing a stranger. The last of his doubt evaporated, replaced by a crushing disillusionment. He stood up, pushing his chair back. He took a step away from her, from both of us, running a hand over his face. "You stole from my mother," he said, not a question anymore. "You lied to me. For a year." "I did it for us," she insisted, but the fight was draining from her voice, replaced by a hollow recognition that her final appeal had failed. "No," he said, the word final. "You did it. For you." He looked from her to the folders on the table, then back to her. "You will pay her back, every cent. You will follow the instructions in that letter, and then we will need to decide what happens next." He didn't say we, as in a couple. He said it as a person stating a problem to be solved. The distance in his voice was more terrible than any shout. Chloe looked at him, at the closed-off pain on his face, and she knew. The performance was over. There was no audience left to convince. Without another word, she snatched her bag from the floor, turned, and walked out of the kitchen. We heard the front door open and close, softer this time. Marcus stood with his back to me, shoulders slumped, looking out the window where her car had been. The victory I had planned for felt ashen and sad. I had my justice, but my son had just lost the woman he loved, or the idea of her, and I had been the instrument of that loss. I stood and went to him. I did not touch him. I simply stood beside him, looking out at the same empty driveway. "I am sorry," I said, "for the hurt this causes you, but I am not sorry for stopping it." He nodded slowly, still not looking at me. A single tear traced a path down his cheek. He wiped it away with the heel of his hand, a quick, angry motion. "I know, Mom," he said, his voice thick. I need to be alone for a while." He turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving me standing there with the evidence of my vindication and the heavy cost of it scattered on the table. The silence after Marcus left was different from the others. It was not the quiet of waiting, or of strategy, or of tension. It was the hollow, resonant quiet after a storm has passed, leaving debris and a strange, washed-clean stillness. I stood in the kitchen for a long time. Then I began to clear the table. I put the teacups in the sink. I gathered the folders, the cream-colored dossier and the legal one. I returned them to my office desk. The evidence had served its purpose. The next 72 hours passed with a bureaucratic certainty. Beverly handled the communication. The full amount, $14,715, was wired to the specified account from a joint checking account Marcus and Chloe shared. I received confirmation from the bank and from Beverly. The financial restitution was complete. Chloe also mailed back the house key, a plain envelope with no note, dropped in my mailbox. I did not see her. Marcus told me she had moved to a short-term rental apartment, that they were taking some space. His voice on the phone was flat, drained. I did not press. The legal threat was rescinded upon receipt of the funds, as per the agreement. The matter was closed, on paper. Life resumed its rhythms, but the texture was altered. I returned to my routines with a deeper appreciation for their simplicity. The garden, neglected somewhat during the weeks of planning, required attention. I found solace in the physical work, the digging, the planting, the pruning. The earth was honest. It yielded what you put into it, nothing more, nothing less. A week after the confrontation on a Saturday morning, I was in the backyard on my knees, transplanting some late-season seedlings. The sun was warm, but not harsh. I heard the side gate open and close. I did not turn around. I recognized the weight of the footsteps. Marcus came and stood a few feet away, watching me work. I finished patting soil around the base of a tomato plant before I sat back on my heels and looked up at him. He looked tired, older, but the raw pain in his eyes had receded into something more settled, a grim acceptance. "Hey, Mom," he said. "Hello, Marcus. The early girls are going in. You always liked those." He nodded, shoving his hands into his pockets. "Can I help?" "There's a spare trowel on the bench," I said. He fetched it and knelt in the adjacent row. For several minutes, we worked in silence. The only sounds the scraping of tools in dirt and the distant chirp of sparrows. It was a comfortable silence. the kind we'd shared when he was a boy, helping me weed. "The money is all back," he said finally, not looking up from the hole he was digging. "Every dollar. I verified it." "I know. Beverly told me." "She sold the bracelet," he continued, his voice low, "and a couple of the bags to help cover it." I made a non-committal sound. I was not interested in the liquidation of the spoils, only in the return of the principal. Another stretch of quiet. He placed a seedling carefully into the ground. "I've been seeing a therapist," he said. "Just started. I couldn't get my head around it, how I didn't see it, how I let you down." I stopped working. I wiped my hands on my gardening apron. "You didn't let me down, Marcus." "Yes, I did." He finally met my gaze. His eyes were bright with unshed tears, but his voice was steady. I was blind. I wanted everything to be happy and easy. I didn't want to look too hard at where the money came from because then I'd have to face something ugly. "I failed to protect you, my own mother." "I am not a child who needs protection," I said gently. "I am your mother, who needed you to see the truth when it was presented. And you did. That was the hardest part, and you did it." He looked down, a tear slipping free and landing in the dark soil. "It's all such a mess." "It is," I agreed. "But it is an honest mess now. That is an improvement." He let out a shaky breath that was almost a laugh. "An honest mess. Yeah." We returned to planting. The sun moved higher in the sky, warming our backs. After a while, the weight between us felt lighter, not gone, but shared. "What happens now?" I asked, not about Chloe, but about him. "I don't know," he said. "One day at a time. The apartment lease is month to month. I'm focusing on work and the therapy." He paused. "I'd like to come for dinner sometimes, if that's okay." "My door is always open to you," I said. "You know that." He finished his row and sat back, surveying our work. The new plants stood in neat, vulnerable lines, ready to take root and grow. "The garden looks good," he said. "It will," I replied. "With time and care, it will." We stood up, brushing the dirt from our knees. The quiet between us was no longer hollow. It was companionable, filled with the unspoken understanding that some wounds heal slowly, and that presence is often the best medicine. He handed me the trowel. I took it, our hands briefly touching. Then I held it back out to him, handle first. "Keep it here," I said. "There's always more to do." He looked at the simple dirt-caked tool, then at my face. He took it. He understood the invitation. It was not a demand for forgiveness or a rush to fix what was broken. It was an offer to work alongside each other in the quiet, patient process of rebuilding something good from the ground up. "Thanks, Mom," he said, his voice thick. I nodded. I turned to go inside to wash up, leaving him in the garden with the sun and the seedlings and the trowel in his hand. My security was restored, not just in my bank account, but in my spirit. The fortress Robert and I built had been tested, and its foundations had held. The quiet dignity of a life lived with integrity was its own reward and its own best defense. I walked into my clean, quiet house, whole,